Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Late Tuesday night, the Miami Hurricanes commitment sweatshirt comes back on as former Auburn and Houston defensive back Keionte Scott commits to the Miami Hurricanes. Now, I think this addition might even fly under the radar for a lot of Miami Hurricane fans. To me, like this one makes a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons. Now, I want to start with this. I feel like there are a lot of people that are throwing away Keionte Scott because it wasn't a great 2024 year and kind of ignoring the context around why Keionte Scott might have struggled in 2024. He made the transition from nickel defender to the boundary cornerback position. That transition did not go as smoothly as I think a lot of people within that Auburn program expected. Go back to 2023. Him playing nickel for Auburn in 2023, very, very good football player. And I think that's the expectation for Keionte Scott coming into the Miami Hurricanes. Now, I like this addition for a couple of different reasons. Number one, you're getting a guy that has shown that he can play at the power forward level in the secondary at that nickel position. Number two is Zach Etheridge knows Keionte Scott very well. Zach Etheridge also knows what Miami has in the secondary coming out of spring practice. Keionte Scott doesn't have 3 years of eligibility remaining. He's got one. And so Zach Etheridge is making this addition knowing that, hey, Keionte Scott has the ability to impact this defense immediately in the 2025 year. And I think lastly, it opens up a kind of a lot of options for what Miami wants to do in the secondary. Like this Miami Hurricane secondary has gone from the 2024 year where you probably trusted one guy in the defensive back room, that was OJ Frederica as a true freshman. Now you probably trust 7, 8, 9 guys in the back end. And now you say, hey, are we going to play Keionte Scott at nickel? We're going to play him at boundary. Are we potentially going to play Keionte Scott at safety? This is a guy that gives you some options in terms of maximizing your secondary in the 2025 year. That's probably my favorite part about the addition of Keionte Scott. Now, I want to get a little bit more into what we've seen from Keionte Scott, especially going back to those Auburn days, especially when he was playing nickel in 2023. Before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and specifically to the Miami Hurricane fans. It's been a blast talking this team during spring practice. Been a blast breaking down the spring transfer portal window additions. The amount of support y'all been showing on Twitter and the comment section, that stuff means the world. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, I want to start with the player Keionte Scott and then move to what this means for this Miami Hurricane secondary. Like 1,300 total snaps for Keionte Scott at the SEC level. You don't play 1,300 snaps in the SEC unless you can play a little bit. Number two, I think the recruiting or the transfer portal ranking, you might say, is a little bit skewed because we're focusing on that 2024 season a little bit too much. Like, look, if Keionte Scott entered the transfer portal 12 months ago, you're probably talking about a blue chip transfer portal edition from what we saw in the film as a nickel defender. That's where Miami's going to play him. At least that's kind of what I'm reading through the tea leaves here. I know Keionte Scott can play nickel at a very high level. Now, you look at Keionte Scott's game one, very sticky in man coverage, which is important for that nickel defender. You look at the 2023 year, was targeted 34 times, only 18 catches. 53% completion percentage when Keionte Scott was targeted in coverage, which is a very good number, especially for a nickel defender. 0 penalties on 34 targets as well, which is worth noting. Knows how to play the football, knows how to keep his hands to himself. The second part about Keionte Scott, very, very solid sticking his nose in the run game, which is probably an underappreciated aspect of that nickel corner position where you look at fundamentally what is the nickel corner's purpose is, hey, we're taking an off-ball linebacker off the field, bringing in a fifth defensive back to give us a little bit more speed and coverage ability. But what we need from our nickel defender is someone who's not afraid to get involved in the run. And Keionte Scott had 10 run stops for Auburn in 2023. Now, the missed tackle rate at 14%, which, look, that's not a bad number for a defensive back. It's a little bit high. Go back to watch him at Auburn. I think that number's a little bit high because he's a headhunter a little bit. He wants to come up and lay some wood, and sometimes that causes him to miss some tackles. But that missed tackle number has a lot more to do with him probably being a little bit over aggressive than a guy that's too laid back coming up and stopping the run, which I'd rather have my nickel defenders like that than somebody that's afraid to get their hands dirty against the run. I look at it and say, all right, you get a really solid football player that we know can play nickel at a high level. Again, when he was coming out in 2023, after the 2023 season, there was some buzz that he was going to go to the NFL draft, like a guy that I think a lot of teams liked a lot. Now, the big reason I like this addition is it gives you some options in the secondary. You know, what Miami has done, and this is kind of the benefit of the portal, you don't build your roster through the transfer portal, right? You build your roster at the high school ranks. What the transfer portal allows you to do is say, hey, we had an immediate issue that needed immediate fixing going into 2025. For Miami, that was in the secondary. Again, you probably had one guy that you trusted to play last year, and that was freshman OJ Frederick. Throw numbers at the problem. That's what Miami's done. You're bringing Zachariah Poyser at safety. You're bringing Xavier Lucas, Charles Brantley, Ethan O'Connor. What do all of these names have in common? They know that they've played solid football, whether it's at the G5 or Power 4 level. You've completely revamped the secondary, not only with players that can play, but depth and numbers. And when you have adequate depth and numbers, you can start getting creative in terms of how you want to maximize this secondary. Now you start playing around with what this rotation could look like. Look, if you like Keionte Scott at nickel, maybe you can give Damari Brown a look at safety. You know, I think Miami's trying to figure out, hey, what's our safety rotation going to be? Zachariah Poyser, Jacoby Thomas. Do we have anybody else that we trust at safety? The addition of Keionte Scott, maybe Keionte Scott plays safety, which I certainly see a little bit on the film where he could have success playing safety. Maybe you want to kick Damari Brown out to safety, but because you have enough depth and you have enough talent, you can start playing around with how to maximize the secondary. As opposed to 2024 is like, look, if you had a beating pulse, you were playing for the Miami Hurricanes in the back end because we didn't have enough guys who were good enough at football. Mario Cristobal, in terms of roster building, this is something I like a lot here. Again, Miami's going to build their roster at the high school ranks. It's been a program that's recruited well under Mario Cristobal. When we have immediate problems that need to be addressed, like 10 years ago, you just had to wait until you recruited the high school ranks and got these guys coached up. You know, the transfer portal window allows you to immediately address concerns that you have on your roster. And I think Mario Cristobal has done that, especially in the spring portal window where we're checking off the needs that Miami had lingering heading into 2025. And again, I think a lot of attention goes to the miss that you had with AJ Halsey. I think you got the next best in with Jacoby Thomas. And then you had a guy like Keionte Scott who gives you a lot of versatility, potentially could play safety for the Miami Hurricanes. Now, the second part of this conversation is, where does Miami go next? I want to talk about Gregory Smith again. You know, we talked about him yesterday. I'm going to talk about him again today. I would like to see Miami circle back on this kid, assuming the off the field stuff check out, which there's no reason to believe there's a ton of off the field stuff. I think why Miami cooled on Gregory Smith is they kind of went full court press on AJ Halsey. Now you look at Gregory Smith, I thought he was trending to North Carolina. Now he seems to be trending to Purdue. And I'll say this, Purdue just took another safety, I think, from Houston. Gregory Smith still to at this point, now this could change, but to this point, is still uncommitted. To me, Gregory Smith is a guy that you add to this roster and say, number one, is in my opinion, going to be a really good football player at some point. The athletic profile is off the charts. I think Miami probably wanted to get a safety that they knew could play, and they did that with Jacoby Thomas. Why not take a flyer on Gregory Smith where he'll be a good football player eventually for you? He very well could be a good football player in the 2025 year. And to me, that makes a lot of sense for the Miami Hurricanes. Then the last name to talk about, Muhammad Toure from Rutgers. Like this kid a lot. You know, assuming the medicals check out, Muhammad Toure played his best ball under Corey Heatherman at Rutgers. I think this one would make a lot of sense. He's an impact guy. Flies around the football field, kind of a tackle machine, but also a very, very good pass rusher as well. Mario Cristobal ain't done yet, and we'll see how they finish this one off, but like the addition of Keionte Scott. We'll pause there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.